Kia ora everyone and welcome to day 3 of our Get Into Gaming series. My name is Kahu Bennett, I stream video games on Twitch TV and I will be your host for this episode. We've already had some amazing guests in this series and today is no different as we delve into the behind the scenes world of gaming. We'll take a closer look at the people who bring us the games that we love and discuss what makes them so fun to play. If you haven't already, make sure you check out more on this series at www.getintogaming.nz. Hi guys, welcome back. Our next guest today is Chelsea Rapp, and she is the current chairperson of the New Zealand Game Development Association and a producer of Cerebral Fix. Welcome, Chelsea.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, would you like to tell us who you are?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I am the chairperson of the New Zealand Game Developers Association. And all that means is I get to talk to a lot of people about video games and how much I love them and how much everyone I work with loves them and why they're a great career for people to be in if you love games and computers and art. And I'm also a producer at Cerebral Fix, which just means that I help our computer developers and our artists turn their ideas into games.
Awesome. Now, I heard that before you got into game development, you had a very different career path. Do you want to tell us what your original career path was and what made you change?
Yeah, sure. So I used to be what's called a molecular geneticist, which just means that I worked with people's DNA to help, if they had cancer. Actually, I worked in cancer genetics. So I worked with people who had cancer to help make them better. And while that was really rewarding and very fun, at the end of every day, I just couldn't wait to get home and play games. And that's, what I'm really passionate about. And so 4 years ago, I left my my job in genetics and I said, how do I get into game development? I only know about biology. I don't know anything about making games. But the cool thing about game development is all you have to really do is you have to want to learn, and the community and the internet can teach you to do so much. And there are so many great schools out there, both online and in person. So yeah, I just took my skills in project management and brought them over. Instead of working in cancer genetics, now I work in making games. So it's a lot of the same processes.
Could you let us know if there are any skills that kind of transferred from knowing how humans work and function? Is there any kind of transferable skills to knowing how games function? Or perhaps even how games are made attractive or appealing to people? Is there any way that those kind of crossed over?
Yeah, definitely. Because so much of what we do in medicine now, if you go to the doctor and you get a blood test done, that test gets run by a machine, and that machine is running on software, which is the exact same thing that games are made out of. So when we would go to people and we would say, how do you use this machine in your doctor's office? Now we just go to players and we say, how do you play this game? Do you like this game? Do you understand how it works? And it's a lot of the same skills in terms of project management, but also learning how to interact with people and asking a lot of questions and turning those questions into, measurable outcomes. Yes, I like this, I like this character, let's see him more, or, just taking that feedback and incorporating it into the thing that we make.
That's awesome. Now, would you be able to tell us, how does the landscape look today for New Zealand gaming?
Yeah. So the great thing about New Zealand gaming is there's almost never been a better time to be involved in it. It grows like crazy every year. There are about 150 new jobs in New Zealand game studios. And because we're kind of constantly growing and getting bigger every year, we're starting to attract a lot of attention from big name studios in the States and in Europe. Companies like Activision and Ubisoft and, these companies that make some of our favorite titles are interested in coming here and partnering with game studios and publishing New Zealand games so that people can buy them and see them on, Steam and Xbox and PlayStation. And that's really cool. And I think that we're also getting, the government is starting to see the value in game development, and you can start learning how to code at any age. I gave a talk a few weeks ago where they were teaching people who were little kids who were 7 years old how to code, which is like, I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 19. So like that just blows my mind that kids as young as 7 are now learning how to make their own games.
That's awesome. Actually, speaking about that, I know there's a school in Rotorua called Te Rangi Haka Haka, which consider themselves trilingual. It's English, Māori, and coding. And this is a primary school to intermediate age cohort. But speaking on that and what you've just said, it does seem like there's a lot of educational resources being pushed towards the younger people to develop careers, right? And so I think that's really important that the people that are about to go, that are starting to consider their careers, understand that they are essentially the first wave of what is going to be an absolute tsunami. So the kids these days that have the opportunity to get basically ahead of the crowd, you guys are going to be the pioneers. You guys are going to be the first ones in that industry. Is that something
like
you kind of
on the moon?
Yeah. Is that something you've heard? And considering your experience, like, do you feel like there's a growth and that now would be a good time to get in?
Absolutely. Now is a great time, especially because the tools out there to learn how to do a lot of these things are free. It's not like, when I was in grad school, learning about biology, and you had to spend like 10 years doing the same thing before you ever really got paid $1 to do it. Like, you could go online right now and make a game for free in the Unreal Engine. All you have to have is a computer. And for instance, I'm based in Christchurch, but our public libraries have computers that can run the Unreal Engine, and they have programs where you can go and learn how to do these things. And if you like music, you can learn how to make music for games. Or if you like to write, you can write both narrative, you can write dialogue, you can write all kinds of stuff. So it's, almost kind of like no matter what your passion is, you can go online and you can find the people who share that passion and learn the skills that you need. You don't have to be an expert, right? Like you can, I worked in genetics for 10 years before I switched jobs. You can at any time decide that you want to be a part of this kind of wave of game developers.
Awesome. I most definitely agree with that. Cool. Was there kind of anything else you wanted to say? Did you want to let people know that it's a good industry to be in? Did you want to do any shout out to anything? Do you have any last words that you want to say?
Definitely. I want to say that if you have an interest in making games, I definitely recommend following us on Facebook. We have the NZGDA has a Facebook group, and you can see, people posting pictures of their projects. There are job postings on there, so you can see what do careers look like. You can say you have an idea for a game and you just need to find another developer to help you. You can post in there. And we also have you can sign up for our newsletter at nzgda.com. And you'll find all kinds of cool industry news and events that are happening around. So, if you want to get more involved and go to a meetup and talk to developers, you can find all kinds of stuff no matter where you live in New Zealand.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chelsea. That's all that we have time for today. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you for giving us your time today.
Thank
you. So that was Chelsea Rapp. You can find out more about her and the New Zealand Game Developers Association on the Get Into Gaming website. Don't go anywhere, stay tuned, and we will have our next interview very shortly. Kia ora guys, up next we have Lisa Blakey. Lisa is an award-winning narrative designer, a community director for the mobile free-to-play developer Runaway Play. She's written an honours dissertation about Indigenous storytelling, and she's also the co-director of Artify Interactive. Kia ora Lisa, welcome.
Kia ora, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on here with us. Now tell us, Lisa, a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? What's your interests?
Kia ora. Yeah. My name is Lisa Blakey. I love games, obviously. I am a whakapapatu Ngāi Tahu and Waitaha down in the South Island, down here in Te Waipounamu. And my marae is based in Bluff, so it's the southernmost marae in Aotearoa, which I'm proud of. I've loved playing games ever since I was a kid. Also love watching movies, and also like to write for games as well, which I've gotten to make a career out of. So that's what narrative design is essentially writing for games and creating the stories and the worlds for those.
Oh, awesome. And I guess coming from, a bit of a Māori background as well, it's so embedded in us to be storytellers. We're natural storytellers, right? And so it makes sense that, it makes sense that you love the games, you love the movies, you love the story, and you love telling the story. Now tell us, how hard was it to get into your industry, and did you face any extreme challenges along the way?
That's a good question. My journey into the industry was pretty unconventional, I suppose. I went to university and studied film and media there at Otago University with sort of intention to either make movies or be a journalist. But what I found while I was studying was that I could actually get to write about games as part of my essays, which just blew my mind at the time. It was really fun kind of pulling it apart and getting it to make it a part of my study as well as my hobby. And then, sort of towards the end of my university days, I was like, what do I want to even do? I didn't even know that New Zealand had a games industry at all. And so I just Googled if there were any companies in Dunedin, and there were, and that was Runaway, and they were actually looking for a community manager at the time. So that's basically creating communities and running the social media accounts. So things like TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, which fit perfectly with what I was studying. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing. So I applied for that job, not at all thinking that I was going to get it, but I did. And so, the first job that I applied for the industry, I ended up getting. So I think for me, the timing was really good. I used to say it was luck, but now I'm like, no, I was qualified for that. And so, my journey was, I guess a bit different to sort of studying like art or doing traditional writing study or that sort of thing, or programming as well. But it's community management, sort of like a new job in games, I guess, or it was back then at least. That was about 5 years ago now. So, super important part of games is building those communities and making sure everyone's happy with the game and happy with who they're playing with.
Most definitely. Now, I think it's quite interesting that you had the passion for games, but you kind of almost stumbled into the gaming industry. Does that kind of like confirm that if you want to have a role in the gaming industry, it's quite good to diversify your skills? So maybe a little bit of either university study or politics study. Would you say that would be quite helpful for people who want to get into the game industry?
I think, for me, it was definitely helpful, but now there's also a lot of like free resources online that you can use, depending on what kind of thing that you want to get into within games, whether it's programming, so actually developing the games, or if you want to do art as well. There's a lot of stuff online for free that you can use. Scratch is a really good program that I know a lot of kids use these days to make games. So definitely tertiary study isn't the only option. Like there's a lot of different things that you can do in your spare time, because I think it's really important to figure out if you actually enjoy doing it before committing to that tertiary, because I actually went to university thinking I was going to be a lawyer. And then the first year of law, I just did not enjoy it all. So I'm really glad I found like film and communications enjoyable. Otherwise, who knows what could have happened. Looking into that early on is important.
No, I think that's a very good message because, especially people who are a lot younger and are still trying to decide what they want to do when they grow up. I think it's good for them to know that if they do have a little bit of an interest in something, there's a lot of resources online. So you can go on and just kind of, like the places the websites that you mentioned, they can just go on and have a look at it and maybe do like an online course or even follow some YouTube videos and see if that's really what they want to do before committing to tertiary study. Awesome, that's good. What's your opinion on reputation in video games? So it says that, you've told us that you are an Indigenous storyteller, and that's incredible to have somebody Māori have that platform to tell stories, right? Do you feel like there's enough representation in today's current video games? And if not, how do you think they can better represent the wider population?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something I'm very passionate about. I still don't think, particularly for Māori representation, that it is in anywhere near passable, I suppose. And I think that's because video games, unfortunately, do have a history of sort of tokenistic representations of any kind of minority. And that still gets seen a lot today. However, now there seems to be a lot more Māori voices speaking up against that. And these are like huge $1 million AAA companies as well who are actually listening and getting consultation with Māori developers as well, which is awesome. Civilization was a big franchise who did it recently, who has like a really awesome representation of Kupe, who I think it came out like a year ago or maybe 2 years ago. So that's like a really cool step in the right direction, but I'm all for self-determined Indigenous made games. So having more developers like me and the other people that you'll be getting to speak to as well is going to be a huge push in the right direction. Because even just like woman representation is really low in the games industry as well, but that's slowly increasing. The more visible we are, I think, the better it will get. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. We appreciate having you here. Thank you for sharing your story and bestowing your wisdom and pass on all of us. Ngā mihi. Thank you, Lisa Blakey. Cool. Once again, thank you so much, Lisa. So she is from Runaway Player Online. You can get more details about that on our website. And we'll be right back with the next interview after this.
Now for our first guest of the day, we're going to be meeting somebody who has a pretty substantial following on YouTube, and he's managed to convert that into something great and something inspiring. I hope some of you know him out there, and I would like to introduce you to Arcadian. Arcadian, welcome to Get Into Gaming.
Hi.
How are you doing? Good. I'm based here in DNA at the moment, and it feels good. Feels good to be here. Feels good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us, taking some time out of your day to, help kids get into gaming. But even though I introduce you, I'd love for you to describe who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's great to be here. To give you a little bit of an outline of who I am and where I'm from. So currently, I am the managing director of a company called NZIQ, New Zealand Industry Qualifications. And our job is to really, one, try and help tackle the equity issues within schools, but also give people or students, really powerful skills, digital skills that they can then use to become the innovators and the creators of the 21st century, and be those people who can solve those big problems. That's where I am now, but where I've come from is like you mentioned, really from a gaming background. I started my gaming career probably when I was like 4 or 5 years old, playing RuneScape, or as it's called now, old school RuneScape, is probably showing my age a little bit. But yeah, getting into the gaming, playing those games, and then even from a pretty young age, 10, 11 years old, I really got interested in probably breaking the games and making my own versions of them. And that got me into a little bit of game development, picked up a little bit of programming. And eventually I stumbled my way into League of Legends, where I became a YouTuber for a couple of years. Well, actually probably a really concentrated 12 months. And so doing YouTube for a little while, becoming pretty popular and successful at that. And then ultimately deciding to head back into the education path and help kids build those careers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone should notice that silver plaque on the bookshelf behind you. Those aren't easy to get, and congratulations on obtaining that. That, of course, was with your YouTube career. Just, do you think your passion fed into that drove you for that really concentrated 12 months of work you put into it?
Oh, absolutely. So I was, I played League of Legends, was my first sort of big game that I really dug a lot of time into. And the way that it started was with a friend of mine who was an animator, and he drew lots of comics and stuff around the League of Legends game. And I sort of, was so interested in the game at the time. I said, hey, let me help you out with this. Let me join in. Let's make something of this. And yeah, we really went in and created League of Legends animations and cartoons, and I did some educational content teaching people how to be good at the game. I was one of the first, or I was sort of in the top 50 in the whole region of Oceania at one stage, and so I played a lot of that game and got really good and tried to use those lessons to teach people. And you'll notice that that's actually, on this side, this is the old school YouTube silver button. They look a little different nowadays.
they may be a little bigger, but I like it. It has that antique feel to it. Not speaking about your age, of course. But, you took that opportunity, and while you could have chased down pro, was that something you wanted to approach, sinking that time into going pro? Or did you feel that what you were going to do with the game and with your career was going to be more beneficial to people, to our tamariki out there?
Yeah, I think I always enjoyed the aspect of being able to do with it what I wanted to do. Pro gaming is not often what it's perceived to be, and just like I get to play games all day. It's now such a competitive environment where you literally need to be not just practicing for maybe 16 hours a day, but you need to be, intentionally practicing in a really efficient way. And so it's so competitive now that that's not really where I found my joy. And so I didn't want to, really pursue that track. And I felt like having the creativity to kind of do my own thing was a really special gift that I had in that space at the time. And so I think creativity was always, more the pathway I was happy to go down.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that, of course, you've mentioned NZIQ. Tell us more about that and how kids can approach that.
Yeah, sure. So as I was growing up, and I think a lot of kids will relate to this, is that I always had this perception of success given to me by, my parents or my school, that university was the next step after high school. And that's what, you're expected to do if you want to get a good job and support your family and have a good life. That was the next step. But I always struggled with that because I never really knew the thing I wanted to do when I was in school. I knew I really loved games. I knew I really, I had an interest in computers and programming, but I never really knew exactly what I was going to do, going into university. And I was lucky enough in high school to actually engage with NZIQ as a student. When they were hosting what they call it's the Microsoft Office Specialist Championship. And so every year they host multiple digital skill competitions. And one of them is called the MOS World Championship. And what happens is that you have to open up, one of the Office applications, you sit this exam, and it measures your capacity or your capability within the software. And the first prize for New Zealand was an all expenses paid trip to the US to represent New Zealand at the World Championships.
Wow.
So as like a 16-year-old student, I was like, Microsoft Office for a free trip to the US? Like, this sounds easier than League of Legends.
So you ended up gamifying Microsoft Office.
Absolutely, for sure. And so I entered this competition. I learned all the functions, and I basically completely learned the software inside and out until I was able to perfect this exam. And I went into the exam. I scored a perfect score. I was the New Zealand representative. I went to the World Championship, so all expenses paid trip. Went to San Diego. There was about 180 participants from every other country in the world. It was crazy, and that was my first introduction to, I guess, realizing that there are more legitimate pathways out there than just the university track. And that's not to put down university or tertiary education at all. It's an incredibly valuable thing to have, but it really opened my eyes to there was more out there. And that got me discovering, what else is there to learn? And it sort of, it showed me that there is a legitimate gaming pathway. There was a legitimate way that I could either become a game developer or an animator, or I could become a trainer of some sort or an educator in new ways as the internet sort of allowed that to happen. And I think that was my first connection with NZIQ. I ended up working for them as a customer support and tech support person back when I left high school. And 10 years later, I now own the business.
I think that's a really great segue from using those opportunities afforded to you through your own passion and converting that to now owning this business that helped you out when you were younger. Now, Arcadian, if people want to find you, how can they find you out there on the wide world of the web?
I think it's a little bit sad. My YouTube presence is coming to an end. My YouTube career did start probably back in 2013, which for some of you is going to think it's ages ago. For me, it seemed like yesterday. But yeah, we started the Pentamagic channel where we did all our animations. We grew to over 300,000 subscribers in our first 5 months. But we actually, I left that channel and left it to my creative partner at the time. And I've sort of done some videos in the past. I'm still on YouTube and Twitter as Arcadian, but I'm not really making content anymore. You might catch the occasional stream of me doing something, crazy or weird, but that's where you can kind of find me, Arcadian on YouTube and Twitter.
So there you have it, kids. If you want to find more of Arcadian, and of course that incredible competition that he's talking about, that made him have the opportunity to take over a business, you can find that at nziq.co.nz. Arcadian, thank you so much for joining us here at Get Into Gaming today. That was so much valuable information. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you for having me. And again, to everyone out there, good luck, have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you around.
Now we're just going to cut to a short break after that, so I hope you join us back here at Get Into Gaming.
What's up, guys? So our next guest is Maru Nihoniho from Metia. Kia ora, Maru.
Kia ora kahu.
Welcome, thank you for joining us today. Maru, so tell us a little bit, who are you and what's your background?
Well, I am a games designer and developer. I run a company up here in Auckland called Metia Interactive, where we design and develop computer games. We've been doing this for a long time, so about 18 years now. We started off making games on the PlayStation. It was our very first game that we published, was on the PlayStation Portable, and that was in 2007. Through to today, where we have made a whole bunch of games, and in more recent times, those games have been around te ao Māori, whether they're in te reo Māori or follow a kaupapa Māori. So yeah, we've just done a whole range of genres on a whole range of different platforms, from PlayStation to mobile. Yeah, so that's what I do. Yeah.
Awesome, that's awesome, Maru. Now, what was your pathway to starting Metia, and did you come across any obstacles along the way?
Okay, my pathway to starting my business really came from a desire and a passion for playing games. So I was a gamer as a young person. So around about the age of 11, that's when I first started playing games, and that was on the Spaceys machines in the takeaway shops up the road. And in those days, you had to have 20-cent piece to play the games, and games like Space Invaders and Gallagher and Defender were so fun to play, and it was even fun to watch people play. I'd stand there for hours watching others get the high score and all that, and I just was really curious, and I really loved it. And so from that time until the time I actually started making games 18 years ago, I played them. So I went from Spaceys to Sega to PlayStation to Xbox, the whole shebang of games, all across all platforms. However, so I was doing that while I was at school. That's through my school years, was playing computer games. But I didn't study anything at school around computer games because there really wasn't, subjects to teach you how to be creative in that respect, how to make games or anything like that. So I learned how to make games after I had left school. And I mean quite some time after I had left school. I spent 14 years in the hospitality industry to begin with, still playing games though. And then I decided to make games, and I established a company, took myself overseas. I went to game conferences like GDC, E3, GDC in San Fran, Australia. I went to all of them because I had to learn how to make games. And so by going to these places, I talked to people, I listened to lectures, I got heaps of tips and hints from other people about how to begin and how to start. And then I sort of started. I built a prototype. I needed funding. That was the hard part. That's a big obstacle. If you don't have money, you can't make anything. Well, you can, but you only get to a certain point. So I really needed to get funding to help support me to build games. But that's really how I came into the industry. It was a lot of self-teaching, going over to meet people and learning, and just getting myself inside the industry to understand and learn what it's all about.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, Maru. I feel quite privileged to have one of the kind of first pave makers in New Zealand in regards to gaming. So you're quite literally the game changer when it comes to gaming in New Zealand. Now, how about in terms of making a game that is attractive to the market? Why do you think Māori and Pacifica Island representation is important? And would you like to talk about one of your particular projects that has addressed that quite well, actually?
Yeah, thank you. One of my motivations for making games is because when I was playing games as a young person, I would think to myself, how cool would it be if this was a Māori character, and we could see our culture in the game. And of course there was, when I was younger, it was a long time ago, but there was nothing like that around. There were cool games. They were entertaining, they were fun, but nothing that reflected back who I am. Now I think back to myself, if there were games or if there were interactive apps, whatever they are, that could connect our young people with who they are, even where they're from, and get them to understand and learn about their culture, whether that be in te reo Māori or tikanga Māori or whatever the game teaches, how awesome would that be? And so it's one of my motivations for designing and developing Māori games and resources, is because I think of me as a teenager or as a young person and what I would have loved to have had and what I could have connected with in the digital realm. So that's my motivation for me. Why we don't see enough is because, or see many, is because there are not that many of us in technology and in gaming, but that can change for sure. Today, right at this point, on this very day, you can get online if you've got 2 screens or 1 screen, doesn't matter. Open YouTube, download a game engine, learn how to use it. It's as simple as that. If you haven't got Photoshop, go find the free alternative to Photoshop. If you want to learn 3D modeling, you don't need 3D Maya or Max, go download Blender. Teach yourself how to 3D model. It's all at your fingertips right now. You can actually teach yourself how to be a game developer if you have an internet connection. So it really starts with our young people today to pick up those tools and the technology tools and use them. Because I know our rangatahi have got no problem using technology. That's pretty clear. All on social, all on gaming, all on this and all on that. Turn that into, let's make something. Get together, plan, have ideas and execute those ideas, learn resources. There's just heaps of free stuff out there. And then we've got our future content creators in the making. There we go.
Oh, that's awesome, Maru. How cool would it be to, next time you, instead of playing God of War, you start up your game and it's Maui, and you're playing as Maui through all his incredible adventures that he's had.
That's one thing. I mean, as I was saying before, wanting to see a character, wanting to see a game that I would have wanted to play when I was younger. This is exactly why I started designing the Guardian Maya game, because I was like, I just didn't want to see a character. I wanted to see this cool wahine toa, because I'm so inspired by a strong woman. I've been surrounded by strong women all my life, and I just didn't see an issue with having a female lead character. It only became an issue when people said, why is she a she? And I was like, what do you ask? Why is she a she? She's a she
Why
because
not?
she's a she.
Exactly.
Yeah, why not? What a random question, but I kind of get it because, gaming and it's male dominated, but hey, we can change the story. We can change the script. It's just getting more of our inspirations out there.
Awesome, Maru. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. And also thank you so much for your contribution to game development here in Aotearoa. Thank you so much. So once again, you guys can catch up with Maru and Metia on our website. We'll have their links available for you there should you wish to check out more of that. Appreciate you, Maru, for joining us, and we'll be right back after this short break. Kia ora guys, welcome to another episode. In this episode, we will be interviewing Naftali Faulkner, who made the game Umarangi Generation. This game recently won 3 awards at the New Zealand Game Awards. Welcome, Tali.
Kia ora, everyone. I guess I'll just introduce myself a little bit. My name's Naftali Faulkner. I'm Naitarangi with connections like Beasley's and Faulkner's there. I'm living in Aussie, so I'm one of those dreaded Mozzies, Maori Aussie. But yeah, no, it's been pretty successful. We also have been nominated for a couple of IGF and GDC awards. So it's this thing where has done really well here home, but it's also grown quite big overseas as well. And thanks for having me here today, guys.
Awesome, thank you for joining us. Now, can you please tell us what the main concept behind the game Umarangi Generation was, and what inspired that concept?
So the main concept around the game is it's a photography game. And with games, there's not very many photography games. So we were sort of operating from that assumption that not many people had sort of played it. But the idea around it was a photography game where you could play it as an absolute beginner to photography. And by the time you finished it, you could sort of have that skill set and sort of know how a camera works so that you could maybe pursue that later on or go into photography yourself. The thematic content is sort of inspired like around the bushfires over here in Australia, where there was like a lot of destruction and things like that, and we're able to sort of my family's house burnt down, so we were able to go sort of behind the blue tape and have a look at what was the disaster response, but then kind of see just sort of what it's like to be in that space. So it's one of the things I think where, like, when you make games, sometimes drawing on your own personal inspirations can be a really effective way of sort of having your own back when it comes to the creative decisions of it. I actually had a younger cousin who, I saw him over Christmas once, and I wanted to show him how to use my camera. And I noticed that when I was explaining to him how to use the camera, I was sort of like explaining it like a video game tutorial, and explaining sort of things like, do this when you're not doing this, or, explaining to him how the lenses worked, and saying, like, this one here is really good for long range, but it's not very good for if you want to take something up close because it can't get into focus. And, he had a lot of fun, and I thought, why not make a video game out of it? That'd be fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you're actually learning how to use a camera in real life. So those skills are transferable to real life, but you're also just playing a video game and going through that story. Now, can you tell us a little bit about how a game like Umurangi Generation is made, and what processes go into making a game like that?
Well, I think there's a thing I would say to anyone out there who wants to get into games, is that the what's called a barrier for entry, which is sort of the height you have to jump to get into that industry, has dropped a lot over the years. And I would say that it's actually one of these things where, if you do want to get into the games industry, there's a lot of different roles that are now open with that. And the reason I say that is because if you're an indie developer like me, you have to do all of them. So you have to sort of do the art, you have to do the sort of coding, you have to do the sort of what's called direction or game design, which is getting the game to play a certain way to make players sort of walk away with a certain idea or how that would work. And then, on top of that, I reached out to one of my friends who does music, and he did the music, because music's not my strong suit. And that's the reality of game making in the sort of current era we live in. Is it's a collaborative thing where, if you don't know how to do coding, that doesn't mean you can't make games. That just means that you can make other parts of the game. Like, if you're good at drawing, or you love drawing in your school books, which you shouldn't be doing, you can, do the concept art, or you can do what's called environmental art, or you can do UI design and all this other stuff. Basically, games are these big collaborative pieces where you can sort of all pitch in to make one big product at the end. If you're doing a game like this, what you want to start with doing is sort of coming up with a good foundation. And, me being Maori, I started with my foundation being one that's more based in this idea of what's called indigenous knowledge, which is this idea of saying, actually, our ways are just as valid as everyone else's, and let's do our ways in a contemporary way and things like that. And so for me, it was about looking at how, Maori weaving works, which is this idea that the stuff you don't see, or the underside, is just as important as what's going on in front of you. And when players play the game, it's this idea that we put stuff that's there, and your eye gets drawn to it, but then there's stuff in the background, and people may not pick that up, or they might, and they might start to see that what's going on in the background is just as important as what's going on in the foreground. I would say that games are these works, they're these artworks that are these collaborative things, and there's not really, when it comes to art, there's not really a rule on what you have to make. It's just, you might want to follow just a couple of little advices or steps other people have done to sort of just get you started. And then once it's sort of going, you can start to say, well, I'm going to go off this way. And that's kind of where games are at the moment. So if you're a young person and you want to get into games, just remember that there's a bunch of different ways you can get into the industry. And I'll just say one last thing on that. If you're an artist, the idea of doing fan art or art of other people's characters, that's not a bad thing, because if other game studios can see that you can draw their characters really well, they'll hire you, because they can say, you know how to draw Mario really well, and you're not going to have to go through all the training of having to learn how to do that. We'd like to hire you, right? And that's the reality of this space. It's very different to what a lot of older industries are like.
That's awesome. Now, I have heard that Umurangi Generation is your first game as an indie game developer. This is a very successful game for a first game. Now, why do you think it was such a hit? Why do you think it was so successful?
For me, it's always this thing I think about, which is that our stories and things like that are valuable. And oftentimes in our own countries, this can sometimes be seen as not the case, but the moment you take it outside of that setting and you show it to the world doesn't have the same doesn't have the same thinking as just New Zealand, and it'll look at what we've got with the fairest lens it can. Basically, I would say don't be afraid to put it out there if you're going to make games, because at the end of the day, people will find it and they will play it and they will get what you're talking about and they will enjoy it. Yeah. So I think that's probably one of the reasons I think the game was pretty successful. Now, to sort of talk like I'm amazing, I think it is a good game as well. It's a very we did put a lot of effort into sort of making the game fun and things like that. But at the end of the day, skills like that are things which you do learn over time. So don't be afraid if your first game you might be thinking it's not right, but that's okay. Just keep going with it, and you will eventually get to the top, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge. Congratulations on such a successful game. And we appreciate having you here.
Cheers.
You guys can find out more about the Umurangi Generation game on the Get Into Gaming website. Now we're going to take a quick break. Stick around and we'll have our next interview up next. Cheers. Thanks, guys. That's it for today's episode. It was great talking to our wonderful guests about games and making the games that we love. As you have seen and heard, gaming is about a lot more than just pointing and clicking. It brings people together, it's a legitimate career pathway, and it allows people to express themselves and tell their stories. Thank you all for tuning in to episode 3. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves and learned something new. Make sure you tune into the next episode where we'll have some of New Zealand's best content creators stopping by to talk about what they do. Until tomorrow, thank you all for watching and take care.